All right, here we have topic 2.20, which is about the relationship between African Americans and Indigenous Native Americans, and the way this relationship was affected by the proliferation of slavery in Indigenous territory throughout the 1800s. So, of course, all of the Americas are Indigenous territory, but we're especially going to be looking at the southeastern United States in this lesson. The five large indigenous nations, or what colonizers of the time called the five civilized nations, a very condescending term celebrating the assimilation of these specific groups to European customs. I wonder what it was exactly that white colonizers found so civilized about the leaders of the Choctaw and Cherokee. I imagine the neckerchiefs had something to do with it. But in all seriousness, it wasn't just the way they dressed that they adapted to European standards. They genuinely tried to learn the legal systems of their occupiers, and they negotiated treaties affirming their legal claims to their land. In other words, they cooperated with the US government to maintain their independence. They also sometimes cooperated with systems of slavery. The great nations all owned enslaved African Americans. They adopted slave codes in their own governments, and they even assisted in returning fugitive slaves to their owners. How very civilized. But they soon found out that their colonizers didn't even play by their own rules when Andrew Jackson became president in 1829 and decided that respecting the legal rights of indigenous people to their own land wasn't nearly as much fun as selling cotton for huge profits. Jackson basically just straight up ignored the validity of the treaties and said, "You're going to Oklahoma, stay there or we'll shoot you." This led to the tragic forced relocation of 100,000 people, known as the Trail of Tears. The treatment of the five great indigenous nations by the US government was both heinous and illegal, but that does not change the fact that its Native American victims owned slaves, whom they brought with them. Meanwhile, something slightly different had been developing in Florida, where we already know enslaved African Americans had been drawn by Spanish promises of manumission. As a result, there were a lot of Maroons in Florida, and many of them were welcomed into Seminole communities and developed kinship or family ties. There's plenty of evidence of this cooperation between African Americans and Seminoles, including images of this guy, John Horse, who acted as an interpreter and statesman, maintaining strong political ties between the two groups. Encroachment by white squatters further cemented this relationship, as Black Maroons resisting re-enslavement found common cause with Seminole natives defending their land. During the War of 1812, they both sided with the British against the Americans, which led to the First Seminole War of 1817. This was their first introduction to a young Andrew Jackson, who always enjoyed enslaving Black people and killing Native Americans, even before he was president. The Seminoles and the Maroons continued to resist relocation through guerrilla warfare until 1835, when Jackson, who was by then President of the United States, sent in the armed forces to eliminate them once and for all. The Second Seminole War lasted 7 years, but in 1842, the U.S. succeeded in subduing the Seminoles and their Maroon allies and ousting them all from the region. The chief of the Seminole Nation at the start of this war was named Macanapa. We'll be hearing a bit more about him in one of our required sources for this lesson.